The first button was easy, the second wasn't. By the fourth one, my hands were steady, but my heartbeat absolutely wasn't. Sienna stood in front of the mirror in my apartment, her back to me, holding her hair up with one hand while I worked the tiny pearl buttons of her dress closed one by one. The fabric was dark green, soft, and expensive looking, and the open back had somehow made this a far less safe situation than either of us had planned. "You're taking this very seriously," she said. I was handed a structural responsibility. "You're buttoning a dress, not defusing a bomb. Those feel emotionally similar right now." She laughed, and that made it worse. Because Sienna always laughed like she trusted me completely, and trust is a dangerous thing when you've been trying very hard not to notice how beautiful your best friend is in a backless dress 2 feet from your chest. The last button slipped once under my fingers. Sienna glanced at me in the mirror. "Nervous? Concentrating?" "That's not what I asked." No, it wasn't. Her name was Sienna Hart, and for 6 years she had been the most consistent part of my life. We met at a community arts fundraiser where I was helping my brother stack chairs, and she was arguing with a florist about why hydrangeas looked emotionally undecided. I laughed, and she heard me. Then she turned, pointed at me, and said, You understand." I did not, but I said, "Obviously." That was enough for her. After that, she somehow stayed. Coffee runs, late-night grocery trips, helping me choose a sofa I still wasn't convinced was the right color. Me carrying boxes into 3 different apartments of hers over the years because, according to Sienna, I had the face of a man who could be trusted with breakables. She worked in museum event planning. I ran branding for a boutique architecture firm. Our lives weren't especially similar, but they overlapped in all the ways that mattered. We were each other's first call. Best friends in the quiet, built-in kind of way that doesn't announce itself until one day you realize half your habits are shaped around another person existing. Which would have been simple if other people had not been so annoyingly observant. My mother once watched Sienna steal fries off my plate, tell me my haircut was trying too hard, then rest her head on my shoulder during a movie and said, "Either marry that girl or stop confusing the rest of us." I changed the subject. Sienna threw popcorn at her. That had basically been our system for years. Deflect, laugh, move on. Tonight should have been harmless. The museum board's winter benefit was one of Sienna's biggest events of the year, and she'd been putting out small fires all week. Missing place cards, a chef with a walnut allergy emergency, one donor who wanted the lighting changed because it made him look historically tired. She was supposed to have gone with her boyfriend, Reed. Then Reed became her ex-boyfriend on Tuesday. Not because of some dramatic betrayal. Honestly, that would have been easier. He just kept failing in small, unimpressive ways until even Sienna, who was patient far beyond reason, finally got tired of carrying the entire relationship by herself. So yesterday, over takeout on my couch, she said, "I am not walking into my biggest event of the season looking freshly dumped." "You did the dumping. Details. And your solution?" She looked at me over her noodles. "Come with me." As moral support? As a very attractive, emotionally stable +1. That sounds fabricated. It is, but in a flattering direction. So now there I was, standing behind her in my apartment because her building had lost hot water. She preferred my lighting. And apparently I had also been assigned formal wear support duties. I finished the last button. "There," I said, and my voice came out lower than I intended. Sienna slowly let her hair fall over one shoulder. Then she looked at herself in the mirror, and for a second neither of us said anything. Because she looked unfair. Elegant. Soft. A little nervous under all the polish. The kind of beautiful that doesn't ask for attention and gets it anyway. She caught my eyes in the mirror. Well, I should have said something safe. Practical, friendly, easy to recover from. Instead, I stepped just a little closer and said quietly near her ear, "Near. You look beautiful." Sienna shivered. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough that I felt it happen before I fully understood it. Her eyes lifted to mine in the mirror and stayed there. The room went very still. Not silent. Some song was playing low from my kitchen. Traffic moved faintly outside, My radiator clicked once, but the kind of still that happens when two people realize a moment has crossed some invisible line and neither of them is sure whether to step back from it or tell the truth about it. Then Sienna cleared her throat. That, she said softly, was not a best friend tone. I should have apologized. I should have turned it into a joke. Instead, because I had apparently lost all instinct for self-preservation, I said, "No, I don't think it was." She turned then, fully, slowly. Now there were only inches between us, her dress brushing my sleeve, her expression unreadable in the worst possible way, half startled, half searching, as if she was deciding whether this was a problem or something she'd been waiting too long to hear. Before either of us could say anything else, her phone rang. Sienna looked down at the screen and closed her eyes. Of course. Problem? 3 problems, probably. It's Celia from the museum. She answered, still looking at me for 1 second longer than necessary. Then she stepped away and moved toward the window. I used those 10 feet of distance to remember how breathing worked. From the call, I got enough to understand that the event had started going wrong before we had even left. A donor table had been rearranged incorrectly. One auction item hadn't arrived. Someone from the press was already early. Sienna ended the call and rubbed her forehead. I have to go now. I'm driving. She looked up. You don't have to rescue the evening just because I let you button my dress. I know, I said. I'm doing it because if I leave you alone with all that, you'll pretend you're fine until midnight and crash tomorrow. That got the smallest smile out of her. There you are, she murmured. That sounds like my actual best friend. I grabbed my jacket, but as we headed for the door, Sienna paused, turned back to me and said, in a voice too careful to mean nothing, Eli, if you look at me like that again tonight, I'm not sure I'll be able to keep pretending I didn't notice. I didn't answer her in the hallway, not because I didn't have one, because the only honest answer was good. And saying that with her lipstick half finished and one earring still in my pocket felt like a reckless way to start an evening neither of us could control. So I opened the passenger door, handed her the earring, and said, then it's a good thing I plan on being extremely professional. Sienna gave me a look as she got in. That sounded fake even to you. Probably. The museum was already glowing when we pulled up. Stone steps lit gold, black cars at the curb, donors in coats that cost more than my first car. Inside, the winter benefit was exactly what Sienna had warned me about. Elegant on the surface, barely held together underneath. The front hall smelled like champagne and lilies, string quartet in the atrium, silent auction tables set under soft amber light. Everywhere I looked, there were people pretending this sort of event happened to them every Thursday. Sienna changed the second we stepped inside, not personality, posture. She went from my best friend in my apartment to the woman who could command a room full of nervous staff and impossible guests with one calm sentence and look sharp enough to cut glass. Celia, she said the second her assistant appeared. Tell me the worst thing first. The donor seating chart was moved back. Fixable. The Rothwell sculpture still isn't here. Less fixable. And the journalist from the Ledger brought a photographer. Sienna closed her eyes for one beat. Of course he did. Then she looked at me. I'm sorry. For what? For inviting you to a glamorous panic attack. I smiled. You say that like I'm not enjoying the floor show. That got a quick breath of laughter, and then she was gone again, crossing the room with a clipboard in one hand and the kind of focus that made everyone around her move faster. I stayed where I could be useful without getting in her way. I took coats when the check-in. Table got swamped. I carried 2 centerpieces because some volunteer looked ready to cry over them. I even spent 10 minutes distracting a donor who wanted to discuss architectural philanthropy, while Sienna quietly solved 3 separate disasters behind him. That was the thing about her. From the outside, she always looked composed. Only I knew the signs. The way she tucked hair behind her ear when she was overstimulated. The way she got extra polite when she was closest to losing patience. The way she stopped drinking whatever was in her glass if she was too stressed to taste it. So when I saw her standing near the auction display with a champagne flute untouched in her hand and that too calm expression on her face, I crossed the room. You haven't had one sip, I said. She looked at the glass like she'd forgotten it existed. That's because it's decorative. You're spiraling with posture. That almost got her. Please don't be observant in a tuxedo, she murmured. It feels unfair. I took the glass from her hand and set it on a passing tray. What's the real problem? She exhaled through her nose. The Rothwell piece was supposed to arrive an hour ago. The board chair is already asking questions. And if that sculpture doesn't appear, tonight's fundraising number drops hard. Before I could answer, a male voice beside us said, "You always did love a crisis." I turned. Reed. He looked exactly like the kind of man who thought expensive grooming counted as emotional depth. Perfect tie, polished shoes, practiced smile. The sort of face that expected to be welcomed even when it shouldn't be. Sienna went still beside me. Not weak, not shaken, just guarded in an instant. "Reed," she said evenly. "I didn't realize you were invited." "I support the arts," he said, glancing at me, "and apparently the +1 category." I felt Sienna tense. That was enough. I smiled politely and held out my hand. Eli, the emotionally stable replacement. Reed blinked. Sienna turned away so fast I knew she was hiding a laugh. Good. Let him feel outnumbered. His smile thinned. Cute. I try. He looked at Sienna again. You look amazing, by the way. I felt her choose not to answer. Then, very smoothly, she said, "Excuse us. Some of us are working." And she walked off. I followed. Not because she needed rescuing, because I knew she hated being left alone with the aftertaste of him. We made it to the service corridor behind the atrium before she stopped. For 1 second, she didn't speak. Then she pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes and said, "I hate that he still knows how to arrive at the worst possible moment. You handled him. I smiled through him." She dropped her hands. "There's a difference." I leaned against the wall beside her. "Do you want me to throw him into the reflecting pool?" That got the laugh I was aiming for, quick, surprised, real. "Tempting," she said. Then she looked at me. Really looked. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not acting weird." "I can act weird later." Her mouth curved. "Please don't schedule it." Before I could answer, Celia came hurrying down the corridor, breathless and wild-eyed. "We found the sculpture," she said. "The delivery company took it to the loading dock entrance on the east side, but the crate is too heavy for the 2 handlers they sent." Sienna straightened instantly. "How long?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. She nodded once and looked at me. I already knew. "Point me at it," I said. The crate was ridiculous, wooden, oversized, and apparently packed by people who hated wrists. But between me, 2 museum handlers, and a security guard with surprising upper body strength, we got it inside and into position just before the board chair swept over with donors in tow. When the cover finally came off and the room collectively softened into impressed silence, I looked across the gallery and found Sienna watching me. Not the sculpture, me. There was something different in her face now. Less guarded, less careful, more like she had run out of ways to pretend tonight was staying manageable. She crossed the room slowly once the donors moved on. "You saved my auction number," she said. "I lifted a box. You stepped in without making me ask twice. That part's easy with you." Her eyes held mine. And then, before either of us could ruin it with a safer sentence, she reached up, smoothed one hand over my lapel, and whispered, "You really have to stop doing things that make it impossible not to want you." I looked at her and forgot briefly that we were standing in the middle of a crowded gallery with 200 donors, a string quartet, and at least 3 people who probably believed emotional restraint was part of the dress code. Sienna's hand was still resting lightly on my lapel. Her eyes were steady, and the sentence she had just whispered was still moving through me. "You really have to stop doing things that make it impossible not to want you." There are a lot of ways a man can ruin a moment like that: by joking, by freezing, by pretending he heard less than he did. I chose none of those. Instead, I said quietly, "That seems like a shared problem." Something in her face changed, not shock exactly, relief. The kind that appears when someone has been bracing for retreat and doesn't get it. Sienna, I started. A camera flash went off to our left. We both turned. The photographer from the ledger was taking candid shots near the auction tables, and one of the board members was already waving Sienna over with the specific panic of a wealthy man who had discovered a detail he should have noticed earlier. She exhaled once through her nose. Of course. I smiled a little. You run toward disasters beautifully. That is not the compliment you think it is. It is from me. That got the smallest smile. Then she leaned closer, voice low. Do not disappear. I won't. Good. And then she was gone again, moving across the room in that smooth, controlled way she had whenever chaos threatened to become visible. I stayed where I was, but now everything felt different. Because there is no going back to normal after a woman looks at you like that and admits she wants you. A few minutes later, Celia appeared beside me with 2 champagne flutes. One for you, she said, one for whatever expression is happening on your face. I took the glass. Is it that obvious? To me? Yes. She glanced toward Sienna, who was deep in conversation with the board chair. To everyone else, maybe not yet. I followed her gaze. You've known her a long time. 4 years, Celia said. Long enough to know she doesn't let many people calm her down. Then she looked back at me. You do. Before I could answer, Reed reappeared. He stopped beside us like he had every right in the world to enter conversations no one had invited him into. Mind if I borrow Eli for a second? He asked. Celia took one look at my face, muttered, I'm suddenly needed somewhere fake, and disappeared. I turned to Reed. This should be deeply enjoyable. He didn't smile this time. You think this is funny? No. I think you are. His jaw tightened. You've known her what, a few years? You help with one event, carry one sculpture crate, and suddenly you think you understand her? I looked at him for a long second. You're right. I don't understand why someone kept showing up for a woman as if she were a task instead of a person. That landed. Good. Reed stepped closer. Be careful. Now I did smile. Or what? He looked towards Sienna across the room. She burns herself out trying to hold everything together, and when she finally cracks, she pulls away from everyone, including whoever thinks he's special. His eyes came back to mine. Enjoy the heroic part while it lasts. Then he walked off before I could answer. I stood there with my champagne untouched, trying very hard not to let him poison the evening. Because the worst thing about men like Reed is that sometimes they know one true thing and use it badly. And yes, Sienna did push herself too hard. Yes, she did hide strain under competence. Yes, I had seen her go quiet instead of asking for help. But I also knew something he clearly didn't. She came to me anyway. Not when things were easy, when they weren't. That mattered more. I found her 10 minutes later in the side gallery near the winter installation, finally alone for half a breath. You okay? I asked. She looked up and read my face instantly. What did he say? I considered lying, didn't. He wanted to give me a warning speech about how difficult you are. Sienna closed her eyes. I'm going to have him removed. I'm not against that. No, I mean it. He should not be here. I stepped closer. Hey, she looked at me again. He doesn't get to narrate you for me, I said quietly. That's not his job anymore. All the tension in her mouth shifted, softened. Then she gave a breath of a laugh. You are being dangerously good at this tonight. At what? At making me forget I'm supposed to stay composed. I lowered my voice. Maybe you don't have to. Not with me. That hit harder than I expected. Her eyes searched mine, and the room seemed to narrow around us again. Soft lights, distant music, people only a few yards away and yet somehow nowhere near this moment. Sienna, I said, when you said you were finding it impossible not to want me. Yes? My pulse kicked. I was about to answer when Celia rushed in again, nearly breathless. Sienna, I'm so sorry, but the board chair wants the lead donor photo now, and the ledger photographer is asking if you and your date can do one too. They think it's great publicity. Sienna stared at her, then at me. Then, with a helpless little laugh, she said, apparently the universe wants documentation. Celia blinked between us. Should I tell them no? Sienna held my gaze 1 second longer, and then she said something that made my entire night tilt. No, she said softly. Tell them yes. If Eli doesn't mind, I'm tired of acting like this is less than it is. The donor photo took 30 seconds and changed everything. Not because of the camera, because Sienna stood beside me with one hand resting lightly at my waist, looked straight into the lens and stopped hiding. No careful distance. No, this is easier than explaining. No room left for either of us to pretend tonight had only been a high-stress blur with unfortunate chemistry. The photographer lowered the camera. Great. One more. Sienna glanced at me. I smiled. Apparently we photograph well under pressure. She gave the smallest laugh. That's not why this feels dangerous. The second photo came out even worse for my pulse. Her shoulders softened. My hand settled at the small of her back. Somewhere behind us, one of the board members said, "Lovely," in the tone of a woman who had decided the evening now had a subplot. Good. Let them. After that, the event finally started behaving. The donors relaxed, the auction numbers climbed. The board chair stopped looking like he might die over logistics. Reed disappeared before dessert, which improved the room in ways architecture alone never could. Sienna stayed composed until the last guest left. Then the doors closed, the quartet packed up, and the entire museum exhaled at once. Celia hugged her. You survived. Barely. You also looked disgustingly elegant while doing it. That's the goal. Celia looked at me. And you. Useful and decorative. Rare combination. I contain multitudes. She laughed and drifted off with the cleanup crew, leaving Sienna and me alone in the now quiet gallery under the soft winter lights. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Sienna took off her heels. Just like that. No grace, no warning. One hand on the wall, one heel, then the other. I stared. She looked up. Don't make a thing of it. You just turned a museum wing into the most attractive disaster scene I've ever seen. That is deeply unhelpful. Is it inaccurate? She opened her mouth, closed it again, and then smiled in the way people do when they've lost the energy to keep pretending something doesn't affect them. No, she said quietly. Unfortunately. I stepped closer. The museum was almost silent now. Just the faint clink of glass from another room, distant voices from staff near the loading dock, our footsteps softened by polished floors, and too much expensive quiet. Sienna. When you said you were tired of acting like this was less than it is, I held her gaze. Did you mean tonight or us? Her expression changed, not startled, certain. Us, she said. One word, clean. No place to hide. That was all I needed. I closed the distance, touched her face, and kissed her. No audience this time. No event to hold together. No photographer. Just her, warm and tired and finally honest, kissing me back like the whole night had been leaning toward this and was relieved we'd finally caught up. When we pulled apart, she kept her forehead against mine and laughed softly. What? I asked. You really waited until after the donors left. I'm classy. You are many things. Not classy. Not reliably. Fair. She slipped her shoes back on badly and said, Walk me out before I collapse in a very expensive hallway. The drive back was quiet in the best way. Not empty. Full. Her hand stayed in mine across the console most of the way to her apartment, and every time I looked over, she was watching the city lights go by with that small, private smile people wear when reality has exceeded expectations. At her building, I walked her upstairs. She set down her bag, leaned against the door, and looked at me for a long second. Can I ask for one more thing? Always dangerous? Go ahead. The buttons, she said, turning around and gathering her hair over one shoulder. I can reach some of them, but not all. My heart gave up pretending this was manageable. So I stepped in behind her, found the first tiny pearl button, and started working them loose one by one. Much slower than before, much worse for me. At the last one, I leaned close and said quietly, You were beautiful tonight. Sienna shivered again, just like before. Only this time, when she turned around, there was no confusion left in her face. No warning, no retreat. She took my tie in one hand, drew me in, and kissed me like she had been restraining that exact decision all evening. A month later, nobody at the museum pretended not to know. Celia called me the dress buttoning incident for 2 full weeks. My mother was unbearable about it, and Sienna still borrowed my hoodies and corrected my taste in furniture like those things had not changed at all. That was the strange, perfect part. Nothing important about us felt new. It just finally had the right name. If you were in my place, what would you have done if your best friend shivered after you whispered, "She looked beautiful" while buttoning her dress? Have you ever been through something like that yourself? Tell me in the comments. If you like this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.